Hello everyone, my name is Mick Pono, and I wanted to create for a while what I call a Go-to-Market Institute or GTM Institute, and I'm gonna try to make a series of very consistent videos that I'll be recording on the different types of topics. I will not make this a sort of a scripted conversation. I'll try to talk about different topics in my own words. I will also try to make this not be a little bit, not make it a drag recording. I want to make it easy so that I can do one recording about a specific topic and then put it out with no editing whatsoever. And hopefully you'll find those videos helpful to you. So this is a goal. First of all, I do want to talk about Go-to-Market Institute, right? Like, why creating something that there's a bunch of great things that already exist. There are different the different people who write different types of topics. There are also Reforge that does quite a few things around go-to-market and growth strategies. There's Product School. There is Lenny's newsletter about product growth and product management. But I wanted to step back and kind of create the source that would talk about go-to-market strategy in general. So the mission that I see is I want to help marketing teams build, market, and grow great products, right? And I don't think that it is based on just one topic that needs to be covered. I believe that go-to-market strategy actually encompasses a few topics. The people that I think will find this helpful is everybody who involved in what I call this go-to-market notion. So this is typically marketers, right? The marketer's job is to understand market positioning for the product, what kind of problems that solve, who the customer, then sales, that mostly responsible in enterprise, at least, on selling the product, demoing the product, closing the deals. Then you have customer success managers. So those are the people who actually maintain, making sure that people stick with you, that you have nurturing, you nurture those people and they do not turn. And obviously what they call product managers. The product managers are the ones who define what the product is built, like what the features you want to put in the product, what are the things that needs to be taken away from a product, how to do testing optimization. And the way I see product marketing that I haven't mentioned is kind of the intersection between product and marketing. Now, why I think it's important to look at all of those different aspects is that the modern go-to-market strategy, any of those people will, that in any of those areas will have to understand other part of the areas because they cannot be in isolation. So if you're a product manager like I am, you have to understand what the marketing do, what are the problems they're trying to solve, what are the customers, what the market direction and trends. You need to understand how the sales works. You need to understand what your sales team is actually emphasizing. And obviously you have to understand, what are the things that come up on the customer success or support side, right? So that's kind of the idea is that this GTM or Go-to-Market Institute will cover those topics just a little bit broader, and then set this high-level understanding what the go-to-market is, and what are the things that needs to be done around that. So, first of all, I want to start with before I start defining what I think the go-to-market strategy is, and I kind of touched already a little bit on what type of areas it touches. I do want to talk about some of the beliefs that I have. And I think those beliefs will help define some of the conversation we'll have. This is not necessarily an extensive list, and this is a things that I particularly found helpful in my career. And some of them you probably have known for a while. But first of all, I do believe in this notion of starting with why. There's Simon Sinek who have popularized this idea of starting with why. how and what, so sort of this framework. I truly believe this is important. It's important to understand why you're doing it, and then understand how you do it and what you do, because if you can understand starting with why, then it's very difficult to build something that is meaningful, because you'll just be dragged into many different directions. So this is kind of related why I started this video, was just defining the mission for this particular project, Go-to-Market Institute, to be as a help for go-to-market teams to kind of understand what kind of product to build and how to create them, take them to market and grow. Because the whole term in this go-to-market strategy is basically how do you take things that you build to market, meaning that people will actually use it. Now, the second belief that I have is that we talk a lot about data-driven decision, right? And I do believe that decisions have to be data-informed and not data-driven, right? You might say, well, what's the difference, right? But I think it's a subtle difference, because if you want to analyze decisions that you already made and the strategy you already have, you already put in place earlier, that means that the data you currently have might explain how good that is. However, if you're trying to build something new, or you want to completely change the direction that your strategy is taking, it's extremely difficult to find any meaningful data that you currently have. So whenever you start with blank slate, it's important to understand the limitations that your current data can provide. And at some point, you'll still have to make the decision, qualitative decisions, because the data that you're going to have is not going to be good enough. That's kind of important to understand the difference. So data informed, meaning that we'll take the data, understand what the context this data comes from, and only then use this as a part of the process for making decision, instead of data driven, which a lot of the teams and a lot of people that I've met in my career is put the meaning behind, is that the data driven is that the data drives the decisions. That, okay, the data says this, that we're going to make the decision, right? So it's a little bit different, let's say, from a standpoint of running successful experiments, right? Successful experiments is where the experiment is well defined, so that data is manifests in what decision you want to make. However, on the strategy side, when you build something on a high level, there is no amount of data, for example, back to the example that Simon has used about the Apple, that would help Apple decide that, oh, well, we're going to build this wonderful products to help people, right? So that is important to understand, and I truly believe it. Now, the third belief that I have is focus on the customer experience, right? And what does it mean is, obviously, that, hey, you are building this product for somebody, and experience is important, right? If you're in consumer-based industry, it's very often that consumers themselves, the companies that build consumer products, kind of build in a way that they have a very quick response to the feature or the type of experience they have. The consumers very in tune. So the consumer products are typically have a little bit better customer experience. Now, on the enterprise or SaaS enterprise size, let's say, it's a little bit different story, because you have multiple people or multiple buying decisions that happening, or some people are using the product, some people are making buying decisions, some people are influencing this buying decision based on technical security parameters. Now, the product itself is not necessarily built for the end user, because you have an assisted sales that actually sells the value of the product, and sometimes they don't really care much about how long or how difficult it is for the end user, right? Like the VP of sales make his decision, but the individual salespeople are actually doing it on a daily basis. Now there is a gap And by the way, in one of those episodes, I do want to talk about why sort of enterprise products have a bad customer experience, or at least have worse customer experience, and why so many new enterprise sort of bottom-up type of companies like Slack, like Figma, actually have a better customer experience because they have built a product for the end user and then allow the end user to enable sort of the buying process from a bottom up, and that improves the actual the experience of it. So focusing on customer experience, it means also that when you have a difficult decisions, and there are definitely difficult decisions, at least from a product perspective or from the marketing perspective, like what to do, what not to do, always optimize for customer experience, and the score and outcomes will take care of themselves. I truly believe that, and I think it is correct. Now, my belief number 4 is that customer is always right unless they're wrong. So what I mean by that is, I have this I have done quite a few customer interviews in my experience, and when you think about proper customer interviews, when you try to identify what kind of problems that the customers are facing versus how do you position the product in front of them so they can give you some feedback, very often you see the problem that the companies are trying to get from the customers, like what the product they want, right? Now, the problem with that is that it's not customer's job to solve the problem. The customer can tell you or hint you on what problem they have, but do not expect them to provide solution for you. This is your job, your organization, you as a professional, figure it out. What is the best way to solve this problem? So the same way you go into the doctor's office and you say, hey, I have this pain. Now that's a doctor experience and doctor's job to figure out what is the best way to treat that and what actually is going on there to actually understand that. Now, similarly, let's say you're going and there's something is wrong with your car that it doesn't start. You go to mechanic. It's mechanic's job to figure out what's going on, to fix it and solve that problem for you. Similar with the companies, do not expect going to them and showing this nice shiny product and asking, hey, do you like it or not? Because sometimes they'll say yes, sometimes they will say no, but it's difficult for you will be to make any actionable things on this decision, and very often they'll tell you they like the product, but then you build this product, you define and put it to market, and nobody buys it or nobody actually uses that product. And because maybe at that particular time it was easier for them to actually accept or actually agree with you that they like that product instead of like being confrontational on the call. So customers are always right unless they're wrong. In my belief and from my experience, is what it means is that the customer might tell you what the problem is, but do not expect customers to tell you what the solution is. So use customer interviews very careful. And by the way, I do have a course around how to conduct proper customer interviews. You can find on my website, mikpono.com. It's under courses. So I break down the very detailed, based on quite a few customer interviews, is that how to schedule them, how to pick the question, how to ask, and more importantly, how to manage the conversation with the customer during those calls. Now, number 5, always consider trade-offs. Also, I think it's kind of like more philosophy, not necessarily just related to the go-to-market strategy. But what I mean by that is, as you trying to, whatever you decide something to do or not to do, there is sort of opportunity cost to it, meaning that you could have been doing something else. So as you're building some strategy, is the implementation of one strategy means that you cannot do something else. Similarly, if you're a product manager, building one feature means not building the other feature. So always put in the idea of like what the trade-offs are, and what you do or what you don't do actually might be more important than what you do. And that's important to keep in mind. Now, The number 6, be agile, which also means making decisions quickly. Now, we talk a lot about, especially in product management, about product experimentation, how to optimize experiences, but we do not talk a lot about optimizing processes and systems. And we're definitely not talking enough about how to build the processes for decision making, because decision making is one of the biggest bottleneck when it comes to growth. If you can make decision one day in one day versus 2 weeks versus 6 months, it's almost always that the quicker decision you'll make, the better it will be. So those companies who may consistently find a way to make critical decision quicker will be at advantage. Now, I would even go as far as to say that in some cases, if you, let's say, think about this in probability case sense. Now, if you say that you can make 95% accurate decision 6 months from now versus making 80% accurate decision tomorrow, what the trade-off of that would be. Now, it might be a question that it's important to take into the context, because if you're building the airplanes, for example, obviously you cannot have 95% safety, right? Like your safety protocol has to be incredibly high. Now, if you're making decision whether to do something on the digital experience, let's say a website, there is not so many risks involved in that when it comes to downside, and you might want to make the decision sooner. So think about the decision making as a process and important differentiator as well. Now, since I'm on this topic and I mentioned context, I do believe that context is important to keep in mind when you think about sort of different strategies. Very often we hear like, oh my God, this is how Figma has done it. This is how Slack has done it. This is how Databricks has done it. So all of those examples often teach you, or people write about them in a way that, all right, so this is what they did. This is step by step. You do it, you get it. Now, it's very important to understand the context in which those decisions has been made. Now, I do not know exactly where I read it, but I do remember reading about the HubSpot founders once said, that when they start building HubSpot, and the HubSpot is a marketing automation platform for those who don't know, but they were basically building a lot of features, right? And the typical train of thought for majority of startup world was like, hey, just focus on one feature and build it well. And they went completely opposite about that. So now, the reason they did it on purpose, because they were building a product for small and mid-sized companies, and they needed a set of features that would help them to bring those companies and give them as many, maybe not every feature was like 100% what they needed, but if every feature provided 70% what they needed and they had 10 of those features, that would allow them to have this pull into the platform, allow them for those segments to stick. So this is why sort of the decisions in which company makes is extremely important. Now, the last one, and by the way, I'm going to be talking about probably a lot of those and maybe even add to this, but the last one is sort of, I know a lot of companies, popularized by Facebook, where, move fast and break things, right? And there is a lot of glorious conversations around sort of like, hey, make this failures okay, mistakes okay. But quite honestly, I mean, from my experience doing consulting for about 9 years and seeing companies, probably over 36 of companies, understanding how they work, I can tell that just saying that as a tagline or as something is different from actually people feeling that they okay of making decisions and making mistakes. So I truly believe that people need to understand that what are the decisions that could be risky, or the decisions that they actually make mistakes, and what are the downside of those decisions. Because in some decisions you'll make a quick And if you're wrong, you can fix it. And I also believe it's one of those episodes I'm going to bring this decision-making model from Amazon. I believe this is a company that was using this model where, like, if a decision is irreversible or reversible, and to what degree, and depending whether if it's a decision is reversible, you move fast, you make the decision, and you kind of be okay with failure, versus the decision that that might be irreversible. So that's where it's kind of important. So the last one, as I said, was freedom is making mistakes. I'm not necessarily say that nobody likes mistakes. Failing actually hurts. You don't want to just make mistakes, but you just have to be okay, understand what those risks that of making those mistakes would be in terms of strategy and go-to-market strategy. Now, with that, I do want to talk a little bit about sort of go-to-market strategy and like how I define product marketing strategy. So for as I mentioned, so the definition, the way I define product market strategy is basically a strategy or action plan that is repeatable and scalable when it comes to building, attracting, growing, managing customers and acquiring customers. Now, why it has to be repeatable and scalable? So what does repeatable means? So the repeatable means that the organization can expect very similar results when executing against particular go-to-market playbook. So what I mean by that is it's sort of like similar to scientific method, right? Like if you do an experiment, if it's a valid experiment, you should be able to rerun this experiment and get pretty much the similar results, right? Because sometimes if you have done something and it's not repeatable, you cannot repeat that. Like you did a growth hack, it really improved one metric that you want to be, but you cannot repeat and create this random growth hack to drive this metric. It's not really repeatable. It's not really part of, well, by the way, I don't think it's a part of the go-to-market strategy in general to be relying on growth hacks, but that's kind of an example. Now, the scalable part. So the scalable means that a company can hire, train new employees using this playbook and see proportional revenue growth or in the process of acquiring customers. So what I mean by that is it's not the fact that same people could repeat it. So think about it as one salesperson, right, who's in a small company. Maybe it's the first or second salesperson. They can do and repeat their own go-to-market strategy when it comes to sales. But it's not scalable. Like you cannot put system processes, playbooks, so that you can hire people, train on those processes, and now your strategy becomes scalable. So you can basically add more people, and those people will somehow be correlated, or additional resources will be correlated with the results. That's an important part. I have been part of a few projects where the startup was on the early stage, where they had a couple of marketing and sales people, and the scaling part of it, typically scaling part that required actually building out system and processes, and it was not easy. And very often you would notice that some of the people that were good at sales were actually not great at scaling the teams, or maybe just not figuring out the way of how to put a step-by-step process or a step-by-step guide or tour that could be reused with other people to help them get to that, get to the same results as this person has done. Now, when it comes to go-to-market strategies, and there are different categories that break down, right? Like I already told you that the go-to-market strategy is basically concerned with product management, marketing, sales, customer success, potential product marketing. Again, I'll talk about product marketing at some other time, but I think that product and marketing themselves, and kind of, for me, product marketing right now is a kind of given. I do think that product and product marketers are basically gonna migrate to the same kind of person. So the if you started product marketer as a product marketer, you should be understanding product management. And I think that as we're going to look forward, these two roles will become sort of one, because I have a hard time seeing how you can differentiate the two. As your product manager, you absolutely have to understand how you need, how to highlight product values, how to describe, like how to put strategic messaging around it, how to put the release plan. Similarly, if you're a marketing person, like you need to know what the prioritization would be like. And to me, those two should be together as they not. So now I do want to break it down into 4 categories. Now, important pieces, what I think is a constitute go-to-market strategy. So the first one is customer, right? Who are you selling to? Who are your ideal customer profile? By the way, I do have a very detailed article on my website, mikpona.com, ideal customer profile, where I actually go through the process of creating ideal customer profile. You can check it out. Then it also answers the question, what pains do your customer have? How can you describe the day in your customer's life, and how does product fits into the overall customer daily activities and workflow? What it means is that how the product that when exactly in a day, so to speak, the customer takes and uses your product, like what are the context, what happens, like is it early, like what are other things outside of your product? We often, again, this is kind of related to the context. We think that they use our product in isolation, but they also get calls, somebody distracts them, they also use some other products. They might have a couple of tabs open, they might be doing something outside of your product that's related to your product. They're exporting some reports, they do some manipulation, and then they act on that in your product. So a lot of this is important to understand. Number 2 is market. So in my belief, and I also wrote a little bit about this, I believe in one of the articles, the market itself is sort of like an ocean, right? Like there are some trends, there are some waves, there are some important technological enablement that happens in the marketplace that allows you to go either or in any type of direction. But to vast degree, it's very difficult. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but extremely difficult to change the market, right? Like you have to be a really big player, and I would say Apple iPhone is something that really changed the market, or maybe a couple other examples, but it's not really few companies in a position to change the market. So even if you're a small startup, you might think that you are changing the market, but most of the time it's the market changes and you can just ride the wave. So for example, Uber itself, when they launched, I don't think they changed the marketplace. I think the trend was already into moving into more consumer-oriented transportation, and then it was a good timing, good technology that put together that allow Uber and Lyft to ride through this wave and build something that is truly market transformative. So market part is also answers on what markets do you want to pursue, how big is your addressable market, is it growing, stable, and declining, what are the biggest players in the market. Now, I do want to emphasize that sometimes when we look about total addressable market, we're not necessarily looking at this data right, because sometimes the way you define market can be different. So let's take this Uber example again. If at the beginning of Uber you would define the marketplace for everybody who would want to transport inside of a big city of urban area, you will have a huge market, and at that point it may be good for projecting potential for the company, for the investors. However, it might not be helpful for your go-to-market strategy because it will be too big. It's difficult to act on. To who do you market? Everybody? You probably want to market for those people who are willing to try something like that, or maybe who actually use transportation at a higher level. So you see, it's not necessarily, and by the way, on the other extreme, you might define, Uber's market is market for those who want on-demand transportation, and that market might be too small to address because that market, I don't think, existed before Uber, right? Or existed, maybe it was too small. So now, how do you address market in terms of go-to-market strategy? Allows you to be actionable. You want to market from a go-to-market perspective, somewhere that you can define the customer, that's big, large enough customer. They have a problem that they want to, that easily understood. And then you can target them. And obviously, as a company grows, then you can change the definition of that market, and you can look at that market from different perspective and different slicing. Now, the third part of it is what's more traditional, what we look at in the textbooks is a product and pricing. I put the two together because product and pricing to me are the same thing. Product itself provides value, and the price is basically an outside conversion in terms of how much value that provides. So that aspect of go-to-market is basically talks about what products are you trying to sell, what product unique value, what's your product's unique value proposition, how do you describe your product's value, how do you differentiate from competitors, which is kind of like a positioning. I am a big proponent of everybody understand positioning. I think that L. Rice positioning book from 70s is monumental when it comes to understanding like everything that goes to the marketing and go-to-market strategy. So I think it's extremely important. I'll definitely talk about that at some later time. And what is your product pricing strategy, right? Like, you might have a freemium or free trial approach. If you're a SaaS, you might pay for, maybe just as e-commerce, one transactional or just subscription. So how do you slice and dice your value, and how do you capitalize on that? And important, and obviously, small things like, what do you build in terms of feature next? Now, number 4 is the customer acquisition and channels. Again, like I'm kind of putting those two things together because I believe they're extremely related and it's difficult to decouple. In some of the literature around this topic, you would find that the customer acquisition process is separated from channels. I do believe that it's two different. It's a same thing, different sides of the same coin. And this is where you will define what are the most effective channels to reach to your target customers, how you message and how you talk about your product is different from different channels that you use. I mean, obviously, the YouTube, it has a video aspect of it. Blog has a different aspect of it. You might want to have a different messages, and you might have it actually attract different type of customers. So important to understand that. Then, what is the most important publication that you can target? How you incorporate social media, and what's product marketing, like what are the channel mix do you want to have for your product? And especially it's important on the different stages, because as you're a smaller company, you have limited resources. You want to focus on a product on a channel that gives you the biggest ROI. That's why a lot of products that you might know have been built on a community basis. People go into the forums, people go into some sort of groups on the LinkedIn, events and so forth, because you can basically go to some sort of place online, digital, offline, where there is a lot of your potential target customers all in one place. So you can the density of the customers per message you translate would be extremely high. So this is 4 different categories that I wanted to highlight when it comes to defining go-to-market strategy. So just to recap, so that we will end on repeating, and I believe repeating is actually helps to remember. So the reason, again, I'm starting this Go-to-Market Institute, because I believe it's important to cover all different aspects of what I call go-to-market strategy, right? The product side, marketing side, sales side, customer success side. And whatever part of this go-to-market strategy you're working in, it's important for you, I would say even critical for you going forward, to understand the other parts of it. And if you're a product manager, it's even, I would believe, even more important, because you want to understand the sales side. You need to understand the marketing side if you want to be successful at managing and building product. Now, The go-to-market strategy is basically a way to retain. It's basically a strategy that it's repeatable. By the way, it's if I'm getting scalable strategies that allows you to acquire, retain, and grow the customers. Like acquire, that's for the first step. Retain, meaning that they engage with you, did something, and then grow, meaning that they use more of your product going forward. Now, and there are 4 different types or categories, I should say, of go-to-market strategy that you should number 1 is customer, number 2 is market, then product and pricing. I would put them together, and customer acquisition process and the channels. Part of the customer acquisition process, the way I define, also includes things like freemium, free trial, and the SaaS side. And also your pricing strategy as well. So that is it. I do want to ask you to subscribe. I want to maybe at the end a little bit talk about myself, for just introduce myself maybe in more details. I decided to do it in the end, so it's not going to be about me, but I do want you to understand why I have certain views on certain topics, and why I'm actually talking about that. So I originally graduated from Kansas State University in marketing, and I moved into Boston area where my parents were at that time, and I started my career in marketing. So I did SEO and SEM, and moved into the lead generation product management at a company called Monster worldwide back then. So I have quite a few, quite significant experience in terms of SEO, SEM, how to build campaign, how to do campaign segmentation. I then started learning what the product management side is. And then I quit that position at Monster to do a startup that unfortunately had failed, but have learned quite a bit. And I transitioned from that startup into consulting. I started consulting more on operational side of the marketing, helping companies set up marketing campaigns, build the Salesforce, HubSpot, Marketo integrations for tracking. I had a small contract team that would help implement the landing pages, to implement tracking, conversions, forms, all of that, and testing. And over time, I have moved into more strategic marketing consulting, because I saw that at the end of the day, the implementation part is easy. The most difficult part is defining the strategy. So when I've done that, I focus on 4 areas. The first is a customer, how to create ideal customer profile. So I would work with companies, do customer interviews, work with companies, identify, okay, who the ideal customer profile for that SaaS product is, or what is the buying situation looks like, who's the approval influencer if it's a SaaS product, and conduct those interviews and create the ideal customer profile so that this could be then taken into the next step. Now, the second piece of it that kind of comes a little bit from ideal customer profile is strategic messaging. What it means, strategic messaging, is starting from the top about the company, like what are you projecting, why, how, again, through this process, and then all the way down to the product messaging. What's the values? What's the top value? What is some of the features you wanna convert into the values? Obviously, I have learned a lot from Andy Raskin. So if you don't know Andy Raskin, he is an expert when it comes to messaging and strategic messaging, and how to use that strategy across not just the company high level stuff and things like raising money and VC, but also from a sales and marketing perspective, how to change your decks, how to create important marketing materials around that. So please check him out. But back to what I was talking about is strategic messaging. Then the third piece that would come out, you had customer, you had strategic messaging. Third piece was customer acquisition process. So the way I defined customer acquisition process is where the campaigns would leave, like what kind, and more importantly, like how do people get to know your product. So this is where, understanding your customer, knowing how to talk about your product, you'll start thinking about how my prospects interact with the product first. Do they come in and ask for a demo? Do they have a freemium? Is it a free trial? Is it a hybrid? Is it traditional? Submit the form. I'll call you and we'll show you the demo, and then we'll spend 6 months negotiating. So that's is important because all of those customer acquisition processes are different. They require understanding. As for example, in the freemium model, you do not want to provide too much, so people are not willing to pay. So what are those balances? What are those balances? For the free trial, you also want to understand, how difficult it is to implement the free trial. So somebody on their own, like if the people can get to the first value, then it's also part of this understanding how people can get to this value, and then what happens next. How do you balance demand? If you have a free trial, you have a lot of customers, but then how do you balance, or how do you look for signals that would enable your sales team to prioritize their time, that would basically call the customer, try to convert them to a larger enterprise deal, for example. And the fourth thing of my consulting focus was content strategy. Content strategy, I think, is and still is an extremely important, I would say, tactic on the level of go-to-market strategies. But it's still like it's a big topic. The content itself is huge. It could be written, and how to do, and it's not just about what you talk about. It's also to build cadence. So I was helping company to build sort of schedule of what to write about, when to write it, what's the release process looks like. Do you post it on a blog, then you repost it on Medium? Do you then tweet about it? How often? How do you highlight? Do you create images? Do you create a videos around that? Now, videos have their own channels. How do you create that? Where do you get the topics? How do you invite people to podcasts, for example? So there's a lot of ins and outs of that. So when I was doing this consulting, I have learned quite a bit and worked different types of problems. And I think one of the strengths of mine, or at least mine experience, is that I have seen different types of problems from different angles, and allows me to sort of build some muscle of understanding what are the things that rise to the level of principle, and what are the things that should be taken out of context, or taken in a certain context, or should be changed or adjusted. After that, I did another startup that failed. We're building Publish now. It's interesting to remember. It was basically at the time where Substack was playing, but we wanted to build sort of the between something that Medium has done for content creators, but we want to build with an idea of allowing companies to have that publishing on their website. So we wanted to go after the WordPress market and allow them more tools in terms of analyzing how to collect and convert and get hints from the customers, or get paid from a content that they release. So we wanted to target enterprise companies and individual publishers. And then when we saw Substack come into the market, we wanted to pivot in a little bit what they did, but unfortunately things did not work out for us. And after that, I have been a product manager at enterprise security company called Barracuda, where I was building the product-led go-to-market strategy, and was focusing on implementation of that. So they had a free email scanner that was the main lead generation for the email security flagship product. And I left Barracuda to join Freedom, and now Achieve. It's a company that's in the personal finance area, and we are providing 3 types of financial products: personal loans, home equity line loans, and debt resolution products, where we help customers get out of debt. And this is a program that is extremely popular and provides a lot of benefit for a lot of people. And I manage their multi-product experiences, everything that happens. On a pre-qual, we try to understand the customer. They go through the flow. We do quite a few testing, optimization, and experimentation. Then we try to identify what the product best fits. So there is a front and a back end of this solution. And also I oversee the partner API, which is basically a solution that allows us connect to the partners and send information about the customer and identify what the products that might be interesting in solving their particular need at that point. Now, this is a little bit longer than I expected to be, but I do want to point one quick thing is that product-led strategy is a very hot topic these days, and I want to say that I was one of the first and earliest people who kind of through my consulting understood that it's something else than just typical marketing and sales, that the product itself has an ability to be a marketing tool, that the product itself can drive customer acquisition channel strategy and be its own channel. Now, I did not come up with this on my own. There was at that time Tom Tungas from Redpoint Ventures who coined the term in one of his blogs. But then I was put into this path because the companies I've seen, a lot of them start using free trial and freemium specifically. And at that time, there was a rise of Slack. I was keen of watching that company grow, and I was extremely excited. I really want to work for Slack. At that time, I didn't have enough experience. Overlooked. I think that's their loss. I really think I emailed Stuart Butterfield, I believe, like around 30 times, asking for any role on a product organization. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to get in. But when I was part of Uptrinsic, they later got acquired by Gainsight. I was a director of marketing. So during that time, I wrote a book called Product-Led Go-to-Market Strategy, or the long-winded way of title of that book was Mastering Product Experience in SaaS, or how to master your product experience with product-led go-to-market strategy. So that was the first, to my knowledge, book of any kind, and this was like an online book. I think there's a few printed copies. One of them is actually right there next to the Ukraine sign of it right here. That was able to summarize what does it mean product-led strategy, what it means in terms of implementing product-led strategy, and how to think of it on a high level. So we described that product-led strategy is actually about customer experience, how they learn about the product, and like what is the customer life cycle, what's the journey they go through the product, and how to optimize or how to build products and thinking for the customers that also can enable your go-to-market strategy, so that product itself becomes a go-to-market strategy. So with that, I think it became a little bit longer than I expected for the first episode. Now, please subscribe. Also, please ask any questions in comments. I will read every single comment, I promise you. And because I will also help me define what's the next conversation going to be about. Now, I do want to say that as I'm going to be making more and more of that, I will also try to point out a few things that's going to be happening in the business world, and maybe something that are things that people share and read, and kind of give my own angle to it. I also want to help bring some resources that I think is extremely valuable, some of the books, because what I have found valuable in my, when I was learning about strategic messaging, how to build one, there was not a lot of resources. I really was doing 2 years of just like searching everything that you can do about these topics, books, articles, blogs, putting all together. And that's, by the way, how this was my first article that got over 600,000 views, and overall this marketing playbook series that kind of has multiple of those topics combined, over 1 million people has read it. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. Again, subscribe. Thank you. Ask questions, and I'll talk to you next time. I hope to make this at least twice per week. Thank you.